In November 2021, a company that had delivered exactly 156 cars in its entire history went public, and within a week, it was worth $153 billion, surpassing Ford and General Motors, two giants with over a century of manufacturing vehicles and millions of cars per year. Rivian's stock went from $78 to $172 in 5 days. And Amazon, the company most obsessed with logistics efficiency on the planet, had already bet $700 million on them.
We're looking at a case where the market decided that the promise of making cars was worth more than actually making them. And what happened next is a brutal lesson about the difference between selling a vision and selling a product.
To understand how a startup with no cars ended up worth more than the giants of Detroit, we need to go back to 2009, in the middle of the financial crisis. A 26-year-old kid named R.J. Scaringe had just finished his PhD in mechanical engineering at MIT, and instead of looking for a stable job, he did something that would seem crazy to anyone: start an electric car company in his father's garage in Florida. The company was called Mainstream Motors, and yes, the name was as generic as it sounds. But Scaringe wasn't just any dreamer. During his time at MIT, he had converted a 1976 Porsche to run on electricity, and he understood something the industry still couldn't see: that the future of the automobile wasn't about improving the combustion engine, but eliminating it.
Look at the timing. In the middle of the automotive apocalypse, Scaringe saw an opportunity where everyone else saw a funeral.
And the context was devastating. 2009, General Motors had just filed for bankruptcy, the largest industrial bankruptcy in the history of the United States. Tesla was barely selling a few hundred roadsters a year, and this kid from MIT says, "I'm going to build electric cars." In 2011, he renamed the company Rivian, a nod to the Indian River, the Florida river where he grew up, and made a decision that would change everything. He abandoned the sports car idea and set out to build an electric off-road pickup and an SUV, meaning a big truck and a big family vehicle, the two types of vehicle that sell the most in the United States. Nobody was doing that. Tesla had elegant sedans for city people, but the average American, the one living in Texas, in Montana, wanted a truck that could handle mud, snow, and trailers. And Scaringe said, "I'll build you one, but electric." But building a car from scratch isn't like creating an app in Silicon Valley. You need billions before selling a single unit. Factories, supply chains, the network of hundreds of suppliers that manufacture every single part, engineers, safety tests, certifications. It's probably the most capital-intensive business on the planet, after building airplanes. And Rivian had none of that. All they had was a vision and a very convincing PowerPoint. And so, Rivian spent the next 7 years, until 2018, developing in total secrecy. They designed the electric platform from scratch, bought a former Mitsubishi factory in Illinois in 2017 to have a place to manufacture, and tested prototypes in private without the press finding out. While Tesla was grabbing all the headlines and Elon Musk was tweeting non-stop, Scaringe was in absolute silence. He secured round after round of private investment, money from big funds behind closed doors, without almost anyone knowing they existed.
9 years in silence. 9 years burning investor money without showing a single car to the public. That requires either blind faith or a product that truly impressed everyone who saw it in private.
And then, in November 2018, Rivian unveiled itself to the world at the Los Angeles Auto Show with the R1T, the world's first electric pickup truck. And it wasn't some ugly prototype with cables hanging out. It was a spectacular vehicle. 300 miles of range, about 480 kilometers, capable of going from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 3 seconds. That's faster than most sports cars, and with serious off-road capability. The automotive press went crazy. Suddenly, the industry's best-kept secret was on every front page. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Because 3 months after that reveal, Jeff Bezos came knocking. In February 2019, Amazon led a $700 million investment round in Rivian. And shortly after, Bezos did something nobody expected. He ordered 100,000 electric delivery vans from Rivian. 100,000 vans. Amazon, the company that delivers more packages than anyone else in the world, had just bet its future logistics on a startup that still hadn't manufactured a single commercial vehicle.
And you know why Bezos chose Rivian over Tesla? Because Bezos didn't buy cars. He bought the architecture of the future.
Rivian offered something nobody else could: an electric platform, the base chassis with integrated motor and batteries, designed from scratch, without the legacy of combustion engines, that could be adapted to any type of vehicle, from a luxury pickup to a delivery van. With Amazon's backing, the money started pouring in. Ford also bet big, and between all the investors Rivian accumulated, over $10 billion in private funding before selling a single car. And then November 2021 arrived, and the IPO, going public, the moment when a private company starts being traded on the market. Rivian priced its shares at $78 each, raised nearly $12 billion in the biggest IPO of that year, and the 6th largest in history. On the first day, the stock closed at $100. A week later, it hit $172, giving Rivian a valuation of $153 billion. To put it in perspective, Ford, with 118 years of history, 186,000 employees, and 4 million cars sold per year, was worth $79 billion. General Motors, $85 billion. Rivian, with 156 cars delivered, was worth more than both of them combined.
If that doesn't look like a bubble to you, I don't know what more you need to see. But here comes the real question. Was Wall Street the crazy one? Or did Rivian have something so revolutionary that it justified that bet?
Because what happened after that magical week in November is where this story turns into a nightmare. Rivian had the money, had the technology, had the largest electric vehicle order in history, and learned the hard way that there's a brutal difference between designing the perfect car and manufacturing it at scale. At their first factory, a former Mitsubishi plant in Normal, Illinois, Rivian had the capacity to build 50,000 cars a year. But in 2022, their first real year of production, they only managed to put out 24,337 vehicles. Not even half. And it wasn't because there was no demand. The waiting list had over 100,000 names. The problem was much more basic. They didn't have enough parts. The supply chain, that network of hundreds of suppliers that manufacture every bolt, every chip, every panel, was strangling them. Semiconductor suppliers, the chips that control everything in a modern car, from the motor to the screen, prioritized Toyota, GM. the ones who've been buying millions of parts from them for decades. And when Rivian called asking for 20,000 chips, the suppliers couldn't have cared less. That quantity meant absolutely nothing to them. The factory had to shut down for 20 days in 2022 because the parts simply weren't arriving.
See the problem? Designing the perfect car is 10% of the work. Manufacturing it at scale, with hundreds of suppliers treating you as a priority, is the other 90%.
But the worst part wasn't the slow production. It was the cost. Rivian had over-engineered their vehicles with custom components that cost a fortune instead of using industry-standard parts. According to Wells Fargo, one of the largest banks in the United States, each Rivian had $25,000 more in components compared to an equivalent car. The result? In the worst quarter of 2022, Rivian was losing more than $100,000 on every car it delivered. Yes, you read that right. The more cars they sold, the more money they lost. And Wall Street didn't take long to react. The stock, which had hit $172 in November 2021, started plummeting. $100 in January, $30 in June, $20 in December. In 1 year, Rivian had lost 90% of its value. The layoffs came in waves, 6% of the workforce in February 2023, and another 10% in February 2024. The company that was supposed to be the next Tesla was bleeding out. And to make things worse, Tesla launched a price war in 2023, slashing the price of its cars by up to 20%, forcing the entire electric sector to compete with impossible margins. The difference between what you charge and what it costs you to build. If Tesla, with a decade-long head start and millions of cars produced, barely makes money at those prices, imagine Rivian losing $100,000 on every single one.
And this is where the story could have ended, Tay. Another startup with a great idea but no ability to execute. But Scaringe had an ace up his sleeve.
In June 2024, Volkswagen, the world's largest car manufacturer, announced it was investing up to $5.8 billion in Rivian to create a joint software venture, a shared business between the two where each one brings what the other doesn't have. And the move was brilliant for both sides. Volkswagen had been trying for years to develop its own software platform for electric cars, and had failed spectacularly, spending billions with no results. Rivian, on the other hand, had software that worked beautifully, but didn't have the money to survive. So Volkswagen bought what it couldn't build, and Rivian got what it needed most: financial oxygen. On top of that, Scaringe announced the R2, a smaller and cheaper electric SUV at $45,000, arriving in 2026. The idea is clear. The R1T at $70,000 was a car for enthusiasts with money. The R2 at $45,000 is a car for the American middle class, the market where the electric war is truly won or lost. If the R2 works and Rivian manages to build it without losing money on every unit, the company survives and becomes a real competitor. But if it stumbles again with the same production problems, the more than $10 billion that investors bet will evaporate.
And here we pull out the lessons you can apply to your business today.
Because Rivian's story isn't just the story of an electric car. It's a survival manual for any entrepreneur looking to scale their business.
First lesson: don't confuse hype with real demand. Valuation is an opinion. Production is a fact.
Rivian was worth $153 billion, with 156 cars delivered. Wall Street wasn't valuing what Rivian was, but what Rivian could be. And that gap between promise and reality is the most dangerous trap for any entrepreneur. If you raise investment based on what you could do instead of what you've already proven, the day reality doesn't match the promise, the fall is brutal. Rivian lost 90% of its value in 1 year, not because the product was bad, but because the expectations were impossible to meet.
Second lesson. Manufacturing is the real product, ELO. Design is just the beginning.
Producing at scale, at cost, with quality, is what separates the companies that survive from those that don't. Tesla took over a decade and nearly disappeared several times before becoming profitable. Rivian discovered that designing the perfect car was worthless if every unit cost 3 times what they charged. And that problem can't be fixed with more investment. It's fixed with cost engineering, with suppliers who prioritize you, and with years of optimization that can't be skipped. In any business, execution kills more companies than a lack of ideas.
Third lesson. A big client can be your biggest risk. When you depend on a single buyer, your fate is no longer in your hands.
Amazon, Rivian's biggest buyer, ordered 100,000 electric delivery vans. But if tomorrow it decides that another manufacturer's vans are cheaper or better, Rivian loses its backbone in one stroke. And that applies to any business. If 80% of your revenue depends on a single client, you don't have a business, you have a contract. Diversification isn't a luxury, it's a survival insurance.
So the next time you see a new company valued at billions without having proven it can manufacture at scale, ask yourself, am I looking at a revolution or am I looking at the next Rivian? Because the difference between one and the other is the difference between building an empire and building a sandcastle.